The gunshot that shattered Dawn Prescott's life still echoed in her dreams 3 years later, though the man who fired it had been dead for nearly as long. She stood behind the bar of the Silver Spur Saloon in Lovelock, Nevada, wiping down glasses with mechanical precision, her hazel eyes distant and unfocused as the evening crowd began to filter in. It was 1883, and the small mining town had seen better days, but the saloon still drew enough dusty cowboys and prospectors to keep the whiskey flowing and Dawn employed. She had learned to make herself invisible, a ghost among the living. Her chestnut hair, once worn in elegant curls, now stayed pulled back in a severe bun. Her dresses, always buttoned to the throat despite the Nevada heat, hid the scars that marked her body like a road map of violence. But it was the scars that nobody could see that kept her truly isolated. The townsfolk whispered about her, called her damaged goods, said she was too broken for any decent man to want. Dawn had heard the rumors enough times that she had started to believe them herself. The door swung open, bringing with it a gust of desert wind and a stranger. Dawn barely glanced up. She had seen countless drifters pass through Lovelock, but something made her eyes linger on this one. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin that spoke of years under the western sky. His clothes were dusty from travel, but well-maintained, and he wore his gun low on his hip with the casual confidence of someone who knew how to use it. When he removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds, something stirred in Dawn's chest that she thought had died long ago. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral as he approached the bar. "Whiskey, if you have it. The good stuff, not the rot gut that burns going down." His voice was deep and pleasant, with a hint of humor that seemed out of place in her gray world. Dawn poured him a generous measure from the bottle they kept for customers who could pay. He laid a coin on the bar without haggling over the price, which marked him as either prosperous or foolish. She guessed the former, based on the quality of his boots. "You passing through or staying?" The question came from habit. Dawn made conversation because it was part of the job, not because she cared about the answer. "Depends on whether there's work to be had. Name's Dalton Vance. I heard in Carson City that a ranch outside town was looking for a foreman." "The Patterson place," Dawn said, recognizing the only spread large enough to need a foreman. "Old man Patterson died last winter. His daughter's trying to run it, but she's having trouble keeping hands. The work's hard and the pay's irregular." Dalton sipped his whiskey, studying her with those gray eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. "You always this helpful to strangers, or am I special?" Dawn felt her walls rise higher. "I'm helpful to paying customers." "You want another drink or information about the Patterson Ranch?" "Both, if you're offering." He smiled, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Dawn's heart beat faster despite her best efforts. "But what I'd really like is your name, Dawn Prescott. I work here." "That's all you need to know." Something flickered across Dalton's face, recognition perhaps, or pity. Dawn tensed, waiting for the inevitable retreat that happened whenever someone learned her story. Instead, he extended his hand across the bar. "Pleased to meet you, Dawn Prescott." "That's a pretty name for a pretty lady." She stared at his outstretched hand like it was a snake. When was the last time someone had offered to shake her hand? When was the last time someone had called her pretty without it being a crude proposition? Her hand moved of its own accord, clasping his briefly. His palm was calloused from hard work, but his grip was gentle, and he released her immediately, respecting her obvious discomfort. "The Patterson Ranch is about 5 miles northwest of town," Dawn said, retreating to the safety of practical information. "You can't miss it. Look for the stand of cottonwoods near the creek." "Much obliged." Dalton finished his whiskey and stood, replacing his hat. "I expect I'll be seeing you around, Miss Prescott." Dawn watched him leave, then forced herself to turn away and focus on the next customer. She had learned not to hope, not to imagine that anyone could see past the damage to whatever remained of the woman she used to be. Yet that night, as she walked back to her tiny room behind the general store, she found herself thinking about storm-gray eyes and a smile that had seemed genuine. The next 2 weeks passed in their usual monotony. Dawn worked her shifts, avoided the men who got too familiar after too much liquor, and retreated to her room to read the dime novels that offered escape from her reality. She did not see Dalton Vance again, and she told herself she was relieved. Getting attached to anyone was a luxury she could not afford. Then one Saturday evening, he walked back into the Silver Spur. Dawn's hands stilled on the glass she was polishing, her body automatically tensing. Dalton looked better than he had during his first visit, cleaned up and wearing a fresh shirt, though his face showed the weathering of 2 weeks under the Nevada sun. "Evening, Miss Prescott." He took the same seat at the bar he had occupied before. "I'll have that whiskey again, if you don't mind." Dawn poured without speaking, acutely aware of the curious glances from the other patrons. Everyone knew everyone in Lovelock, and a stranger paying attention to the damaged saloon girl was news worth noting. "I took your advice about the Patterson place," Dalton said after his first sip. "Got hired on as foreman. It's hard work, like you said, but honest. I appreciate the recommendation." "I didn't recommend anything. I just told you where it was." "Maybe so, but you could have steered me wrong. Instead, you gave me solid information. That counts for something in my book." Dawn risked a glance at his face. He looked sincere, but she had learned that sincerity could be the most dangerous mask of all. "Why are you here, Mr. Vance? If you want to celebrate your new job, there are prettier girls who work the floor." "I'm here because I wanted to see you again." He said it simply, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "I've been thinking about you." Fear spiked through Dawn's chest, sharp and familiar. "I'm not interested in that kind of work. If that's what you're after, you should leave now." Dalton's expression shifted to one of understanding, and something that might have been anger on her behalf. "That's not what I meant, and I apologize if I gave that impression. I just meant I'd like to know you better. Maybe take you for a walk sometime, or dinner if you'd allow it." "Why?" The question came out harsher than she intended. "What could you possibly want with someone like me?" "Someone like you? You mean someone who works hard, gives straight answers, and has the prettiest eyes I've seen in 3 states." Dalton leaned forward slightly. "Dawn, I don't know what's got you so convinced you're not worth knowing, but I'd like the chance to prove you wrong." She wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain the walls that kept her safe from further pain. But something in his voice, in the steady way he looked at her, made her pause. "I don't go walking with men. I don't do dinner. I work, I go home, that's my life." "Fair enough." Dalton did not push, which surprised her more than his original offer. "But if you ever change your mind, the invitation stands. No expectations, no strings. Just 2 people getting to know each other." He finished his drink, paid, and left. Dawn stood frozen behind the bar, her thoughts churning. Part of her wanted to run after him, to take the chance he was offering. The larger part, the part that remembered blood and pain and betrayal, kept her feet firmly planted. Over the following weeks, Dalton became a regular at the Silver Spur. He came in every Saturday night, always sat at the bar, always ordered the same whiskey, and always made polite conversation with Dawn. He never pressed his invitation, never made her uncomfortable, and never treated her with anything but respect. Other patrons noticed and commented, some with approval, most with skepticism. Dawn heard the whispers, the warnings people gave Dalton about wasting his time on damaged goods, but he never seemed to listen. "You're a stubborn man," Dawn told him one evening after he had been coming around for nearly a month. "I prefer persistent." He grinned at her over his glass. "My mama always said I didn't know when to quit. Maybe you should learn." But there was less bite in her words than there used to be. She found herself looking forward to Saturday nights, to the sound of his voice and the way he talked about his week without expecting anything from her in return, probably. Dalton studied her face. "But where's the fun in that? Besides, I like our conversations. I barely talk to you." "You talk more than you did that first night. I count that as progress." Dawn felt something crack in the armor around her heart. It terrified her. "Mr. Vance, I need to be clear with you. I'm not the kind of woman you should be spending time on. There are things in my past that make me unsuitable for courting or anything else respectable." "We all have pasts, Dawn." His voice softened. "I've done things I'm not proud of, made mistakes, hurt people I cared about. That doesn't mean I don't deserve a future, does it?" "Why should you be any different? You don't understand." "Then help me understand. Talk to me." She wanted to. The desire to unburden herself to this patient, persistent man was almost overwhelming, but the fear was stronger. "I can't, I'm sorry, but I can't." Dalton nodded slowly. "All right." "But Dawn, whatever happened to you, whatever you think makes you broken, it doesn't change the fact that you're worth knowing. You're worth caring about. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you." He left soon after, and Dawn spent the rest of her shift blinking back tears she had not allowed herself to cry in 3 years. That night, alone in her room, she let herself remember things she usually kept locked away. The memory of being 18 and foolishly in love with a charming gambler named Marcus who had swept into town promising her the world. The wedding that had seemed like a dream come true. The slow revelation of Marcus's true nature, his cruelty, his violence, his need to control and dominate. The night he had beaten her so badly she almost died. The night a neighbor's intervention had saved her life and ended his. She had been told she was justified, that Marcus's death had been self-defense on the neighbor's part. But the damage had been done. Marcus had spent 2 years destroying her sense of self-worth, convincing her she was worthless, telling her that no one else would ever want her. Even dead, his words echoed in her mind. The scars on her body had faded, but the ones on her soul remained fresh and raw. Dawn had rebuilt herself into someone hard and closed off, someone who could not be hurt again because she never let anyone close enough. It had worked for 3 years. She had survived. But survival was not the same as living, and part of her was so tired of just surviving. The next Saturday, Dalton arrived as usual, but this time he carried a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the bar in front of Dawn with a shy smile that seemed out of place on his weathered face. "What's this?" she asked, suspicious of gifts. Marcus had brought her gifts too, always followed by demands for gratitude she had not wanted to give. "Just something I thought you might like. No obligation attached, I promise. You can throw it in the trash the minute I leave if you want." Dawn untied the string and folded back the paper to reveal a book. Not one of the cheap dime novels she usually read, but a real book with a leather cover and gold lettering. "Jane Eyre" by Charlotte Brontë. "How did you know I like to read?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "I've seen you carrying books, and Tom at the general store mentioned you by every new novel he gets in stock." Dalton shifted his weight, suddenly uncertain. "I read this one a few years back. Thought you might appreciate it. It's about a woman who's been through hell but finds her way to happiness anyway." Dawn ran her fingers over the cover, overwhelmed. No one had given her a gift since before Marcus. since back when she still believed people could be kind without wanting something in return. This is too much. I can't accept this. Sure you can, it's just a book. But his eyes told her it was more than that. It was an offering, a gesture of understanding and hope. She clutched the book to her chest, feeling the crack in her armor widen. Thank you, this is very thoughtful. You're welcome. Dalton's smile returned, warm and genuine. There's an inscription inside, just something to think about. After he left that night, Dawn opened the book to find neat handwriting on the inside cover. For Dawn, who is stronger than she knows and more worthy than she believes. Some stories have happy endings. Maybe yours can too. Dalton. She read those words a dozen times before she finally opened the book and began to read. She finished it over the next week, often staying up late into the night, unable to put it down. The story of Jane, who had been mistreated and told she was worthless but who eventually found love and respect, resonated so deeply it hurt. By the time she reached the ending, she was crying, something she rarely allowed herself to do. The following Saturday, Dawn made a decision that terrified her. When Dalton arrived and took his usual seat, she poured his whiskey and then did something she had never done before. She poured herself a small glass of water and came around the bar to sit on the stool next to him. I finished the book, she said, her heart pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. Dalton's eyes widened slightly, but he kept his voice casual. What did you think? I think you chose it very carefully. I think you were trying to tell me something. Maybe I was. He turned to face her more fully. Did it work? Dawn took a deep breath, gathering her courage. My husband's name was Marcus Prescott. We married when I was 18. He was 25 and seemed so sophisticated, so worldly. I thought I was the luckiest girl alive. For the first month, he treated me like a princess. Then he started to change. Or maybe he was always that way and just stopped pretending. She paused, waiting for Dalton to interrupt, to tell her he had heard enough, that he did not want to know the sordid details. Instead, he simply waited, giving her space to continue at her own pace. He hurt me. Regularly. He told me I was worthless, that I was lucky he put up with me, that no one else would ever want someone as pathetic as me. I believed him. By the time I realized how wrong things were, I was too afraid and too broken to leave. The words came faster now, like poison being drained from a wound. One night, he came home drunk and angrier than usual. He started beating me worse than ever before. My neighbor heard the screaming and broke down the door. There was a fight. Marcus ended up dead with a bullet in his chest. I'm sorry you went through that. Dalton's voice was steady, filled with compassion but not pity. No one deserves to be treated that way. The town blamed me, some of them. Said I must have done something to make him angry, that a good wife would have been able to calm him down. Others just felt sorry for me, which was almost worse. I became the poor, damaged Dawn Prescott, too broken for decent society but not quite scandalous enough to run out of town. She finally looked at him directly. That's what you're trying to court. That's the truth you need to know. Dalton held her gaze, his storm-gray eyes intense but gentle. Thank you for telling me. That took courage, and I'm honored you trusted me with your story. But Dawn, you've got it wrong about one thing. What's that? I'm not courting what happened to you. I'm courting who you are now. The strong woman who survived hell and built a life on the other side. The woman who works hard, treats people fairly, and somehow kept her kindness despite every reason not to. That's who I see when I look at you. Not damage, not broken pieces. A whole person who's been through a storm and came out still standing. Dawn felt tears threatening and blinked them back fiercely. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to let someone close again. I'm afraid all the time. Afraid of being hurt, afraid of being controlled, afraid of losing myself again. I understand fear. And I'm not asking you to stop being afraid." Dalton reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently took her hand. "I'm just asking for a chance to show you that not all men are like Marcus, that being close to someone doesn't have to mean losing yourself. We'll go as slow as you need. If you want to stop at any time, we stop. No questions, no pressure." His hand was warm around hers, strong but not constraining. She could pull away any time she wanted. The realization that he was giving her control, that he was asking rather than demanding, made something shift inside her chest. "One walk," she heard herself say. "Tomorrow afternoon, my day off. We can walk by the creek, but just a walk, nothing more." Dalton's face lit up with a joy so genuine it made her breath catch. "Tomorrow afternoon. I'll meet you at the general store at 2 o'clock. Thank you, Dawn. You won't regret this, I promise." He left shortly after, and Dawn returned to her position behind the bar in a daze. She had just agreed to spend time alone with a man, something she had sworn she would never do again. Terror and anticipation warred in her chest. She told herself she could still change her mind, could send word that she had reconsidered. But deep down, she knew she would be there at 2 o'clock, ready to take the first terrifying step towards something that might be healing. The next afternoon, Dawn changed her dress 3 times before settling on a simple blue calico that brought out the color in her eyes. She brushed her hair until it shone and even let it down, though she tied it back with a ribbon rather than wearing it loose. As she walked toward the general store, she felt simultaneously like she was floating and drowning. Dalton was waiting, looking cleaned up in a fresh shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed. He smiled when he saw her, and some of her anxiety eased. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. They walked in silence through the dusty streets of Lovelock, heading toward the creek that ran along the western edge of town. "It's a beautiful day," Dalton said finally, breaking the quiet. "Hot, but that's summer in Nevada for you." "It's almost always hot here," Dawn replied, grateful for the mundane topic. "Sometimes I miss the seasons from back east. My family was from Pennsylvania originally. I'm from Kansas myself. Been drifting west for about 10 years now, doing ranch work mostly. Lovelock's the first place that's felt like somewhere I might want to stay." They reached the creek, where cottonwood trees provided welcome shade. Dalton led her to a flat rock near the water's edge, and they sat down, still maintaining a respectful distance between them. Dawn watched the water flow past, trying to calm her racing heart. "Can I ask you something?" Dalton's voice was careful. "You can tell me it's none of my business if you want. All right. How long has it been since Marcus died?" 3 years this past April." Dawn picked up a pebble and tossed it into the creek. 3 years, and I still flinch when someone raises their voice, still have nightmares, still feel him watching me sometimes, even though I know he's dead and buried." "Trauma doesn't follow a schedule," Dalton said quietly. "It takes as long as it takes, but it doesn't have to be forever. You can heal, even if the scars never quite disappear. You sound like you have experience with trauma." Dalton was quiet for a long moment, staring at the flowing water. "I was in the war. Fought for the Union, saw things no person should see. Came home to find my parents dead of fever and my younger sister married off to a man I didn't trust. I tried to settle down, tried to forget, but the memories followed me. So I started drifting, running from my past. What changed? I got tired of running. Realized that no matter how far I went, I brought my demons with me. So I stopped moving and started dealing with them instead. It's hard work, and some days are worse than others, but I'm better now than I was 5 years ago. Better than I was 2 years ago. That's all any of us can do, right? Get a little better bit by bit." Dawn found herself leaning slightly closer to him, drawn by his honesty. Do you ever wonder if you're capable of being normal again, of having the things other people have, all the time? Dalton turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his eyes mirrored her own. But I'm starting to think normal is overrated. Maybe what matters is finding someone who understands your particular kind of not normal and accepts you anyway. Is that what you think you found with me? The question came out barely above a whisper. I think I've found someone worth knowing. Where it goes from here, that's up to both of us to discover. He held out his hand, palm up on the rock between them, an invitation, not a demand. Dawn looked at his hand for a long moment, then slowly placed hers in it. His fingers closed gently around hers, and they sat like that in comfortable silence, watching the creek flow past and listening to the rustle of cottonwood leaves in the breeze. Over the following weeks, Dawn and Dalton began to build something fragile and precious. They took more walks by the creek, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his work at the Patterson Ranch, about the horses he was training and the repairs he was overseeing. She told him about the books she was reading, about her dreams of maybe opening a small restaurant someday where she could cook the recipes her mother had taught her. Dalton was endlessly patient with her fears and boundaries. When she flinched at a sudden movement, he moved more slowly. When she needed space, he gave it without complaint. He never tried to kiss her, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. His respect for her limits made her trust him in ways she had not thought possible. The town noticed, of course. People whispered about the unlikely courtship between the damaged widow and the drifter foreman. Some were supportive, hoping Dawn might find happiness again. Others were skeptical, warning Dalton that he was wasting his time on a woman too broken to be a proper wife. Dawn heard the comments and felt the old shame trying to reassert itself, but Dalton's steady presence helped her push back against the negative voices. Let them talk, he told her one evening as they sat on her favorite rock by the creek. People always find something to gossip about. What matters is what we know to be true. And what's that? Dawn asked, feeling brave enough to lean against his shoulder. It had taken her weeks to get comfortable with casual touch, but she was learning that Dalton's presence was safe, that his strength did not come with demands. That you're one of the strongest people I've ever met, that you're healing, bit by bit, and that I'm falling in love with you if you want to know the truth. Dawn's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had used that word. Part of her wanted to run, to retreat back behind her walls. But the larger part, the part that had been slowly unfurling like a flower toward the sun, wanted to lean into this feeling. I'm scared, she admitted. I care about you so much it terrifies me. What if I'm not capable of being what you need? What if I'm too damaged for this to work? Dalton shifted so he could look at her directly. Dawn, you don't have to be anything other than who you are. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm just asking for a chance to love you, scars and all, and to let you love me back with all my own damage and faults. I don't know if I remember how to love someone. Her voice broke slightly. Marcus twisted everything good in me. What if there's nothing left? There's plenty left. Dalton reached up slowly and cupped her face gently in his hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. I see it every day. In the way you're kind to customers even when they don't deserve it. In the way you care for that stray cat behind the general store. In the way you're fighting so hard to heal. That's love, Dawn. It's just been buried under fear, but it's still there. She turned her face into his palm, letting herself absorb his warmth and steadiness. I want to try. I want to believe that I can have something good again. But you have to be patient with me. Some days I might take steps backward. Some days the fear might win. I'm not going anywhere. He said it with such certainty that she believed him. We'll take it one day at a time and we'll figure it out together. They sat by the creek until the sun began to set. painting the Nevada sky in shades of orange and pink. Dawn felt something inside her chest that she barely recognized anymore, hope. It was fragile and tentative, but it was there, growing stronger with each moment she spent in Dalton's presence. As autumn arrived and the oppressive summer heat began to ease, Dawn found herself transforming in small but significant ways. She smiled more often. She let her hair down when she was with Dalton. She even started wearing dresses in lighter colors instead of the dark, severe clothing she had hidden behind for years. The nightmares still came, but less frequently, and when they did, she had learned to remind herself that Marcus was gone and could never hurt her again. Dalton continued to prove himself trustworthy in 100 small ways. He remembered the things she told him, showed up when he said he would, and never once made her feel obligated or pressured. When she finally worked up the courage to kiss him, a brief, tentative press of lips by their creek one October afternoon, he had been so careful and gentle with her that she nearly cried. "You all right?" he asked afterward, searching her face with concern. "More than all right." Dawn was amazed to realize it was true. "That was my choice. I wanted it. That makes all the difference." "It does." Dalton's smile was radiant. "Thank you for trusting me with that." They began spending more time together. Not just walks by the creek, but occasional dinners at the small cafe in town. Church services on Sunday mornings where they sat together in the back pew. And quiet evenings where Dalton helped Dawn practice the cooking she hoped would one day fill her restaurant. The more time they spent together, the more Dawn realized that what she felt for him was nothing like what she had felt for Marcus. With Marcus, there had been obsession and fear and the desperate need to please him. With Dalton, there was peace and joy and the freedom to be fully herself. She could disagree with him without fear of violence. She could have her own opinions without being told she was stupid. She could have a bad day without being blamed for ruining his mood. It was, she realized, what love was supposed to feel like. One November evening, as they sat together in the small parlor of the boarding house where Dalton had taken a room, he grew serious. "I need to tell you something," he said, taking her hand. "Miss Patterson has offered to sell me a portion of the ranch. Says I've done good work and she'd rather have a partner than just a foreman. It's a good opportunity, a chance to build something permanent." "That's wonderful." Dawn squeezed his hand, genuinely happy for him. "You deserve it. You've worked so hard." "I want to do it," Dalton continued. "But I need to know if you see a future here in Lovelock, with me." Dawn's heart began to pound. "What are you asking?" "I'm asking if you can see yourself spending your life with me, building something together, maybe getting married someday when you're ready." He rushed to add, "I'm not proposing right now. I know you need more time. But I need to know if this is going somewhere, because if it is, I want to put down roots here. If it's not, I need to know that too." Dawn took a shaky breath. Marriage. The word alone was enough to bring back memories of Marcus, of vows that had become chains. But when she looked at Dalton, she did not see Marcus. She saw a man who had spent months proving his trustworthiness, who had given her space to heal, who had shown her that love did not have to hurt. "I'm scared," she admitted. "The thought of marriage terrifies me, but when I think about my future, you're in it. I can't imagine my life without you anymore, and that's both wonderful and terrifying." "I understand." Dalton brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Winter came to Nevada, bringing cold nights and occasional snow that transformed Lovelock into something almost magical. Dawn and Dalton continued their courtship, growing closer with each passing week. She introduced him to the few friends she had maintained, and he introduced her to the hands at the Patterson Ranch. People stopped whispering quite so much about the unlikely couple, and started accepting them as a fixture in the community. Dawn began to envision a future that included marriage, children, the restaurant she dreamed of. With Dalton by her side, these things seemed possible rather than like distant fantasies. He encouraged her dreams, helped her save money, and even started looking at properties in town that might serve as a future restaurant location. On Christmas Eve, they attended the town's holiday service together. The small church was decorated with pine boughs and candles, and the hymns filled the cold air with warmth. Afterward, Dalton walked Dawn back to her room at the general store, but before she could go inside, he stopped her. "I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his coat pocket. "Before you worry, it's not a ring. Just something I wanted you to have." Dawn opened the box to find a delicate silver locket on a chain. She opened it and found 2 spaces for photographs, currently empty. "I thought maybe you could put pictures of people who matter to you in there," Dalton explained. "Your family, if you have any, friends, or just keep it empty until you're ready to fill it. But I wanted you to have something beautiful that was yours, that no one gave you out of obligation or with strings attached." Dawn's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect, thank you." She turned around and lifted her hair. "Will you help me put it on?" Dalton fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers gentle against her skin. When Dawn turned back around, he was looking at her with such love that it took her breath away. "I love you," she said suddenly. It was the first time she had said the words out loud, and they felt like freedom. "I love you, Dalton Vance. I don't know when it happened exactly, but it's true. I love you." His smile could have lit up the entire town. "I love you too, Dawn Prescott, more than I knew it was possible to love someone." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her. It was different from their previous kisses, deeper and more passionate, but still achingly gentle. Dawn kissed him back, pouring all her healing hope into the gesture, and when they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "I think I'm ready," she said softly. "Ready for what?" "For a future. With you. I don't know if I'm ready for marriage tomorrow, but I'm ready to start planning for it, to believe that it's possible, to stop letting fear make my decisions." Dalton pulled her into a hug, holding her close. "We'll go at your pace, always at your pace. But knowing you want this, that you can see a future with me, that's the best Christmas gift you could have given me." They stood together in the cold Nevada night, holding each other and dreaming of the future. For Dawn, it felt like coming back to life after years of merely existing. The broken pieces of her heart were knitting back together, not into their original shape, but into something new and perhaps even stronger. As winter gave way to spring, Dawn and Dalton began making concrete plans for their future. He finalized the purchase of his portion of the Patterson Ranch, becoming a landowner and businessman in truth. Dawn gave notice at the Silver Spur, ready to leave behind the saloon and the memories it held. She began working with the bank to secure a loan for her restaurant, and Dalton co-signed the papers without hesitation, showing his faith in her dreams. In April, on the 4-year anniversary of Marcus's death, Dawn did something she had never been able to do before. She visited his grave in the Lovelock Cemetery. Dalton accompanied her, standing a respectful distance away to give her privacy but close enough to provide support if she needed it. Dawn stood over the simple wooden marker that bore Marcus's name and dates. She had feared this moment for years, afraid that seeing his grave would bring back all the terror and pain. Instead, she felt only a profound sense of release. "You don't control me anymore," she said quietly to the grave. "You made me believe I was worthless, that I was broken beyond repair. But you were wrong. I survived you. I healed. And I found someone who sees the beauty in my scars, who loves me not despite what happened, but including all of it." She reached up and touched the locket Dalton had given her, which now held a small photograph of her parents on one side and one of herself and Dalton on the other. "I'm happy now. I'm building a life I want. You're just a memory, and every day you become less important. Eventually, you'll fade away entirely, and all that will be left is the woman I became because I survived you." Dawn turned away from the grave and walked to Dalton, who immediately opened his arms to her. She walked into his embrace, feeling safe and loved and whole. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "I'm better than all right. I'm free." She looked up at him, smiling through tears. "I'm finally free, Dalton. He's gone, really gone, and I don't have to carry him with me anymore. I'm so proud of you." He kissed her forehead. "You're the bravest person I know." They left the cemetery together, and as they walked back toward town, Dawn felt lighter than she had in years. The ghosts were finally laid to rest. The future stretched before her, bright with possibility. In June, Dalton formally proposed. He did it simply, without grand gestures or public displays. They were at their spot by the creek, the cottonwoods providing dappled shade from the afternoon sun. He got down on one knee and pulled out a simple gold band. "Dawn Prescott, you've made me happier than I ever thought I could be. You've shown me that broken things can be beautiful, that scars are just proof that we survived, and that love is worth the risk of pain. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how precious you are?" Dawn did not hesitate. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up for a kiss that was full of joy and promise. They sat by the creek for hours, making plans and dreaming about the life they would build together. Dawn felt no fear, only excitement. Dalton had proven himself in every way that mattered. He was nothing like Marcus. He was her partner, her equal, her love. They married in August of 1884 in the same small church where they had attended Christmas Eve service the previous winter. Dawn wore a dress of ivory silk, chosen because she loved the color rather than because tradition demanded it. Her hair hung loose down her back, decorated with wildflowers Dalton had picked that morning. She walked down the aisle alone, choosing to give herself away rather than being given by someone else. It was a small but significant assertion of her independence and agency. Dalton waited at the altar in his best suit, his eyes shining with love. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for vows, they had written their own. "I vow to love you in your strength and support you in your struggles," Dalton said, his voice steady. "I vow to respect your boundaries, honor your healing, and never take your trust for granted. I vow to build a life with you where you always feel safe, valued, and cherished. You are not broken, Dawn. You are beautifully, perfectly whole, and I am honored to be your husband." Dawn's voice shook slightly but grew stronger as she spoke. "I vow to love you with all that I am and all that I'm becoming. I vow to trust in your goodness even when fear tries to convince me otherwise. I vow to build a future with you filled with joy, partnership, and the kind of love I once thought was impossible. You saw beauty in my brokenness and helped me heal. You are my home, Dalton, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you walked into that saloon." There was not a dry eye in the church as they exchanged rings and sealed their vows with a kiss. The reception that followed was small but joyous, held at the Patterson Ranch with food Dawn had prepared herself. As she danced with her new husband under the Nevada stars, Dawn marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, holding her close as they swayed to music played by a local fiddler. "I'm thinking about how wrong Marcus was. He said no one would ever want me, that I was too damaged for love. But here I am, married to the most wonderful man I've ever known. He was wrong about everything. He was." Dalton kissed her softly. And I'm going to spend every day for the rest of our lives making sure you never doubt your worth again. They spent their wedding night in Dalton's rooms at the ranch, which would be their home until they could build their own house on his land. Dawn was nervous. The intimate aspects of marriage still carried echoes of Marcus's violence, but Dalton was patient and gentle, letting her set the pace and never pushing beyond what she was comfortable with. It was nothing like her first marriage. It was tender and loving, a true joining of two people who chose each other freely and completely. The years that followed were the happiest of Dawn's life. She opened her restaurant in the spring of 1885, calling it Dawn's Kitchen. It was small but quickly became popular for her home-style cooking and warm hospitality. Dalton helped when he could, but mostly he supported her dream by believing in her and helping manage the business side of things when she felt overwhelmed. The ranch prospered under Dalton's management. He had a gift for working with horses, and his training program became known throughout Nevada. He and Miss Patterson proved to be excellent business partners, each respecting the other's expertise and working together to build something lasting. Dawn and Dalton built a small but comfortable house on their portion of the land, close enough to town that Dawn could easily reach her restaurant, but far enough out that they had privacy and space. They filled it with books and comfortable furniture and the laughter that came from genuine happiness. In the fall of 1886, Dawn discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with both joy and terror. The thought of bringing a child into the world, of being responsible for another life, awakened old fears. But Dalton's steady presence and excitement helped calm her anxieties. "You're going to be an amazing mother," he told her, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "You're strong and kind and full of love. Our child is lucky to have you. What if I'm not enough? What if I can't protect them the way they need? You won't be alone. We'll do this together, just like everything else." Dalton kissed her forehead. "And our child will never know violence or fear in our home. We'll make sure of that." Dawn's pregnancy was difficult at times, complicated by memories of Marcus and fears about her ability to be a good mother. But with Dalton's support and the care of the town doctor, she made it through. On a warm June evening in 1887, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy with his father's storm-gray eyes and a full head of dark hair. They named him James, after Dalton's father, and from the moment Dawn held him, she felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. Looking at her son's tiny face, she made a silent vow that he would never know the kind of cruelty she had experienced, that he would grow up knowing he was loved and valued and safe. Dalton was a devoted father, taking to the role with the same patient dedication he brought to everything else. He would walk the floor with James when he cried at night, sing to him in his deep voice, and look at the baby with such wonder that Dawn often found herself falling in love with her husband all over again. "Thank you," she told Dalton one night as they sat together watching their sleeping son. "For what? For showing me that broken things can be beautiful, for being patient while I healed, for loving me when I didn't think I was capable of being loved, for giving me this life, this family, for everything." Dalton pulled her close, careful not to disturb the sleeping baby in her arms. "You did the hard work, Dawn. I just loved you while you did it. You're the bravest person I know, and I'm honored to be your husband and the father of your child." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep and marveling at the family they had created. Dawn thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the terrified, broken woman she had been to the healed, whole woman she had become. The scars were still there. They would always be there, but they no longer defined her. Life continued to unfold in ways both ordinary and extraordinary. The restaurant thrived, becoming a gathering place for the community. Dalton's horse training business grew, bringing in buyers from across Nevada and California. James grew into a bright, curious toddler who was doted on by everyone in Lovelock. In 1889, Dawn gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Eleanor after Dawn's mother. Eleanor had Dawn's hazel eyes and a temperament that was somehow both fierce and gentle. With two young children, life became busier but also richer. Dawn had to adjust her hours at the restaurant, eventually training a manager so she could spend more time with her family. But she never regretted the choice. Watching Dalton with their children filled Dawn with a happiness she had not known was possible. He was gentle but firm, teaching them right from wrong without fear or violence. He encouraged their curiosity, listened to their endless questions, and made them feel heard and valued. He was, in short, everything a father should be. As James and Eleanor grew, Dawn told them carefully edited versions of her past. She wanted them to understand that people could overcome difficult circumstances, that healing was possible, and that love could bloom even in the hardest soil. She never gave them details that would frighten or burden them, but she also did not pretend that life had always been easy. "Your mama is the strongest person I know," Dalton told the children one evening as they sat around the dinner table. "She went through some hard times before I met her, but she never gave up. She kept going, kept healing, and built this beautiful life we all share. That's what strength really means, not giving up even when things are difficult." James, now 7 years old and thoughtful like his father, looked at Dawn with new respect. "Is that why you always tell us we can do hard things?" "That's exactly why," Dawn confirmed, reaching over to ruffle his hair. "Because I know from experience that we're all stronger than we think we are. We can survive things we don't think we can survive, and we can build beautiful lives on the other side of pain." Eleanor, 5 years old and already showing signs of her mother's determination, nodded seriously. "Like how we fixed my broken doll. She was broken, but now she's beautiful again." "Exactly like that, sweetheart." Dawn felt tears prick her eyes at her daughter's wisdom. Broken things can be fixed, and sometimes they're even more beautiful for having been broken and mended. By 1891, Dawn and Dalton had been married 7 years, and their love had only deepened with time. They still took walks by their creek when they could steal away from the children and responsibilities. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still chose each other every day in 100 small ways. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their land while the children played in the yard, Dawn reflected on how far she had come. "You remember the first time you came into the Silver Spur?" she asked Dalton. "I remember thinking you had the saddest eyes I'd ever seen, and the most beautiful," Dalton replied, taking her hand. "I remember wanting to know you, to understand what had put that sadness there, and how I might help take it away. I thought you were crazy for paying attention to me. I thought you'd realize I was too damaged and leave like everyone else. I knew you'd been hurt. Anyone could see that. But I also saw your strength, your resilience. I saw someone worth knowing, worth loving." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I'm so glad you gave me a chance, that you let me prove that not all men are like Marcus." "You saved me," Dawn said softly. "Not in some grand, dramatic way, but in all the small, everyday ways that mattered. You showed me I was worth loving. You gave me space to heal. You proved that love doesn't have to hurt." "We saved each other," Dalton corrected. "You gave me a reason to stop drifting, a place to call home. You showed me that my past didn't have to define my future. We healed together, Dawn. That's what made it work." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play and their land stretch out before them. Dawn thought about the woman she had been 8 years ago, so broken she could barely function, convinced she would never be whole again. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. She was not broken anymore. She was healed, or at least healing, which was all anyone could really ask for. She had built a life filled with love and purpose. She had a husband who cherished her, children who adored her, a business that thrived, and a community that respected her. She had everything she once thought was impossible. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about happy endings," Dawn replied, leaning against his shoulder. "I used to think they were only in stories, that real life didn't work that way. But we got one, didn't we? A real, true happy ending." "We did." Dalton kissed the top of her head. "And we'll keep choosing it every day. That's the secret, I think. Happy endings aren't something that just happens to you. They're something you build day by day, choice by choice." As the years continued to pass, Dawn and Dalton's life together remained full and rich. They added a third child to their family in 1893, another son they named Daniel. The restaurant continued to prosper, and Dawn eventually opened a second location in nearby Winnemucca, managed by a woman she had trained personally. Dalton's horse breeding program gained recognition throughout the West, and he began mentoring young men who wanted to learn the trade. Their children grew into fine young people. James inherited his father's way with animals and his mother's determination. Eleanor became known for her kindness and her sharp intelligence, helping at the restaurant from a young age and showing a natural talent for business. Daniel, the baby of the family, proved to be the most like his mother, thoughtful and empathetic, with a gift for reading people. Through it all, Dawn and Dalton remained partners in every sense of the word. They supported each other's dreams, shared the burdens of parenthood and business, and never took their love for granted. They had their disagreements, of course, but they had learned to communicate without fear, to resolve conflicts without anger or violence, to be honest even when it was hard. On their 15th wedding anniversary in 1899, Dalton planned a special evening. He arranged for the children to stay with Miss Patterson, who had become like an aunt to them over the years, and he took Dawn back to their spot by the creek. It was the same place where he had first told her he was falling in love with her, where he had proposed, where they had celebrated countless milestones over the years. 15 years, Dawn marveled, sitting on their favorite rock with Dalton's arm around her waist. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes it feels like we've always been together." "Best 15 years of my life," Dalton said, "and they just keep getting better. Every year with you is better than the last." Dawn looked at her husband, noting the gray that now threaded through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that came from years of smiling. He was 40 now, she was 37, and they had built an entire life together. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" Dawn asked. "What's that?" "That you saw me when I couldn't see myself. That you believed I was worth loving when I was convinced I wasn't. That you were patient enough to let me heal at my own pace. If you hadn't walked into that saloon, if you hadn't been stubborn enough to keep coming back, I'd probably still be trapped in that half-life, surviving but not really living." "You would have found your way eventually," Dalton said. "You're too strong not to. But I'm glad I got to be part of your journey. Loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life." They watched the creek flow past, the same water that had witnessed their entire relationship. So much had changed since that first walk, but the love between them had remained constant, growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. "I want you to know something," Dawn said, turning to face Dalton fully. "Marcus used to tell me I was broken, that no one could love me. For a long time I believed him. But you showed me that I wasn't broken at all. I was wounded, I was healing, but I was never broken. You helped me understand that being hurt doesn't make you worthless, that scars are just proof that you survived something hard. You taught me something too, Dalton replied. You taught me that love isn't about fixing someone. It's about seeing them clearly with all their scars and struggles and loving them anyway. It's about creating a safe space for healing, and then having the patience to let that healing happen at its own pace. Dawn kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. After 15 years, they still had the power to make each other's hearts race. "Thank you for loving me," she whispered against his lips. "Thank you for letting me," Dalton whispered back. "Thank you for taking a chance on a stubborn cowboy who didn't know when to quit." "Thank God you didn't quit," Dawn laughed, the sound full of joy. "I'm so glad you were too stubborn to listen to all the people who told you to give up on me." They stayed by the creek until the stars came out, talking and dreaming and remembering. When they finally returned home, Dawn felt full to bursting with happiness. She had come so far from the damaged, terrified woman she had been. She had built a life she was proud of, found love she had thought impossible, and created a family that filled her days with purpose and joy. The turn of the century brought changes to Lovelock and to their lives. The railroad expanded, bringing more commerce and more people. Dawn's restaurants adapted to serve the new residents and travelers. Dalton's ranch continued to thrive, and he began partnering with his eldest son James, now 13 and eager to learn everything about the business. Through it all, Dawn and Dalton remained each other's anchor. When the children frustrated them, they leaned on each other. When business challenges arose, they solved them together. When old memories threatened to pull Dawn back into darkness, Dalton was there to remind her of how far she had come. And when Dalton's war nightmares returned during particularly stressful times, Dawn held him and reminded him that the past was past, that they were safe, that they had built something beautiful together. By 1905, as they approached their 21st wedding anniversary, their oldest children were grown and beginning lives of their own. James, now 18, was effectively running the horse training program with his father. Eleanor, 16, managed the original restaurant with her mother. Only Daniel, 12 years old, was still fully under their roof and care. "We're getting old," Dawn joked one evening as she and Dalton sat on their porch, watching another Nevada sunset. "Speak for yourself," Dalton replied with a grin. "I'm aging like fine wine." "You're aging like old leather," Dawn teased, then softened her voice. "Beautiful old leather, well worn and perfect." Dalton pulled her close. "We've had a good life, haven't we? Better than either of us probably dared to hope for." "We have." Dawn leaned into his warmth. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life. That I get to wake up every day next to a man I love in a house we built, with children we're raising together. It's everything I thought was impossible." "You deserved it all along," Dalton reminded her. "You just needed someone to help you see it." Dawn thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the terrified girl who had married Marcus, to the broken woman behind the bar of the Silver Spur, to the healed, whole woman she had become. It had not been easy. There had been setbacks and struggles, moments when the fear threatened to overwhelm her, times when she wanted to give up. But Dalton had been there through all of it, steady and patient and loving. He had shown her that broken things could be beautiful, that scars told stories of survival, that love did not have to hurt. He had given her the time and space to heal, and then he had built a life with her that exceeded her wildest dreams. "I love you," she told him, the words as true now as they had been on their wedding day. "I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Dalton replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. You're my heart, Dawn. You always will be." They sat together as the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter of their beautiful life together. The broken girl Dawn had been was gone, replaced by a strong, healed woman who knew her worth. And next to her sat the man who had helped her find her way back to herself, the cowboy who had seen beauty in her brokenness and loved her back to wholeness. Their story had started in a saloon in a small Nevada town, with a damaged woman who thought she would never heal and a patient man who believed otherwise. It had unfolded over years of slow healing, growing trust and deepening love. And it continued on, day by day, choice by choice, as they built the life they had both dreamed of. As they prepared for bed that night, Dawn caught sight of herself in the mirror. She saw a woman in her early 40s, with lines around her eyes and silver threading through her chestnut hair. But she also saw strength in her reflection, contentment, joy. She saw someone who had survived hell and built heaven on the other side. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "I'm thinking about how wrong I was," Dawn replied, leaning back against him. "I thought I was too broken to love, too damaged to deserve happiness. But I wasn't broken. I was just hurt, and hurting people can heal if they're given the chance and the space to do it." "You healed yourself," Dalton said, his voice full of pride. "I just loved you while you did it." Dawn turned in his arms to face him. "You did more than that. You showed me what real love looks like. You proved that not all men are violent, that relationships don't have to be about control and fear. You gave me back my belief in happy endings." "We gave each other that," Dalton corrected. "You made me believe in home again, in permanence, in building something lasting." "We healed each other, Dawn. That's what made it work." They went to bed holding each other close, grateful for the life they had built and the love that had made it all possible. Outside, the Nevada night was clear and full of stars, the same stars that had witnessed their entire journey together. The years continued to pass in a blur of joy and purpose. James married at 21, bringing a sweet young woman named Catherine into the family. They built a house on the ranch property and began their own journey together. Eleanor followed her own dreams, moving to San Francisco to attend college, something that would have been unthinkable for Dawn's generation, but which filled her with fierce pride. Daniel showed signs of becoming a lawyer, his sharp mind and sense of justice pointing him toward a career in law. Through it all, Dawn and Dalton remained the heart of their family. They were the example their children pointed to when asked what love should look like. They were the safe harbor everyone returned to when life got hard. They were proof that broken things could be mended, that love could heal, that happy endings were possible if you were brave enough to reach for them. In 1912, as they celebrated their 28th wedding anniversary, Dawn and Dalton returned once more to their spot by the creek. It had become a tradition, this annual pilgrimage to the place where their love had grown. The cottonwoods had grown taller, the creek had carved a slightly different path, but the essence of the place remained the same. 28 years, Dalton said, his voice full of wonder. "Somehow that doesn't seem like enough time. I want 100 more years with you." "We'll take whatever time we're given and be grateful for every day," Dawn replied. She was 50 now, Dalton was 53, and while they had slowed down somewhat, they were still active and involved in their businesses and family. "You remember what you said to me here, that first time we walked together?" Dalton asked. "I said a lot of things. Most of them pushing you away. You asked me why I would want to spend time with someone like you, and I said I wanted to spend time with someone who works hard, gives straight answers, and has the prettiest eyes I'd seen in 3 states. Dalton cupped her face gently. "You still have those eyes, Dawn. They're not sad anymore, though. Now they shine with joy." Dawn felt tears gather, but they were happy tears, so different from the ones she had cried in those early days. "You did that. You and our children and this life we built. You all made my eyes shine again." "You did it yourself," Dalton insisted. "You chose to heal. You chose to trust me. You chose to build this life with me. All I did was love you and give you space to become who you were always meant to be." They sat by the creek until the stars came out, as they had done so many times before. Dawn thought about the journey that had brought her here, from broken to healed, from fearful to brave, from alone to beloved. It had not been easy, and the scars would always be part of her story, but they no longer defined her. They were simply proof that she had survived, that she had overcome, that she had refused to let her past determine her future. "Thank you," she told Dalton, the words encompassing everything she felt but could never fully express. "For what?" he asked, though he must have known. "For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For loving me through the healing. For showing me that broken things can be beautiful. For giving me this life, this family, this love. For everything, Dalton. Thank you for everything." "It's been my honor," Dalton replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life. Watching you heal and grow and become the strong, beautiful woman you are today, that's been my privilege. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." They held each other close as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. Their love story was not the kind told in fairy tales. It had no magic spells or grand gestures. Instead, it was built on patience and trust, on slow healing and steady support, on choosing each other every day even when it was hard. But it was real, and it was beautiful, and it was proof that even the most broken hearts could heal if given the chance. As they walked back home that night, hand in hand under the Nevada stars, Dawn felt profoundly grateful for the life she had been given. She had been broken, yes. She had been hurt and damaged and told she was worthless. But she had survived. She had healed. And she had built a life filled with love and purpose and joy. She was no longer the frightened girl who had married Marcus or the damaged woman who had hidden behind the bar of the Silver Spur. She was Dalton Vance, wife and mother and businesswoman and survivor. She was strong and whole and deeply, profoundly loved. And it was all because a stubborn cowboy had walked into a saloon one day and refused to believe that she was too broken to love. He had seen beauty in her brokenness, had been patient while she healed, and had shown her that broken things, when mended with care and love, could become more beautiful than they had ever been before. Their story continued on, day by ordinary day, season following season. They watched their children build their own families, held their grandchildren, and grew old together with grace and gratitude. Through it all, their love remained the foundation on which everything else was built. James and Catherine gave them 3 grandchildren, bringing new life and joy to the ranch. Alina eventually returned from San Francisco with a husband in tow, a professor of literature who fit seamlessly into their family. They opened a bookshop in Lovelock, combining Alina's business sense with his love of books. Daniel became a successful lawyer in Carson City, fighting for justice with the same determination his mother had shown in rebuilding her life. Dawn and Dalton remained active in their businesses well into their 60s, though they gradually handed over more responsibility to the next generation. They spent more time traveling, visiting their children and grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. The love that had started so tentatively had grown into something unshakable, a force that sustained them through every joy and challenge life brought their way. On their 40th wedding anniversary, in 1924, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Dawn looked around at the children and grandchildren filling their home, at Dalton standing beside her with his arm around her waist, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. All of this had seemed impossible once. All of this had grown from the seeds planted by a patient cowboy who had refused to give up on a broken woman. "Speech," their son Daniel called out, and the rest of the family joined in the call. Dawn looked at Dalton, who nodded encouragingly. She took a deep breath and addressed the room full of people she loved. 40 years ago, I married the best man I've ever known, but I almost didn't. I was so convinced I was broken, so certain that I didn't deserve love, that I nearly pushed him away." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Your father, your grandfather, this stubborn, patient, wonderful man, he saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He saw past the damage to the woman I could become if I was given the chance to heal. And then he gave me that chance. He loved me without demanding anything in return. He was patient when I was afraid. He was gentle when I expected violence. He showed me what real love looks like, and in doing so, he gave me back my life." Dalton squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Dawn continued, her voice growing stronger. "I want you all to know that broken things can be healed. That having a difficult past doesn't mean you can't have a beautiful future. That love, real love, is patient and kind and worth waiting for. Your father taught me that, and I hope we've taught it to you." The room erupted in applause, and more than a few people were wiping their eyes. Dawn sat down, feeling Dalton pull her close. "That was beautiful," he whispered in her ear. "It was true," she replied. "Every word." They celebrated late into the night, surrounded by family and friends, by the evidence of the life they had built together. When everyone had finally gone home or to bed, Dawn and Dalton sat together on their porch, watching the stars and holding hands. 40 years, Dawn said softly. 40 years of being loved by you. 40 years of healing and growing and building this beautiful life. I'm so grateful, Dalton, for all of it. So am I." Dalton brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You're still the best thing that ever happened to me, Dalton Vance. You're still the woman with the prettiest eyes I've ever seen, and you still make my heart race when you smile at me. We've had a good life, haven't we?" Dawn leaned against his shoulder, comfortable and content. "The best life," Dalton confirmed, "and it's not over yet. We've got more years to fill with love and laughter, more grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch together." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something lasting and true. Dawn thought about the woman she had been at 25, broken and afraid, convinced she would never be whole again. If she could go back and tell that woman what the future held, the love and joy and family that waited for her, she wondered if that frightened girl would have believed it. Probably not. The healing had to be experienced to be believed. The love had to be lived to be understood. But that was all right. The journey had been worth every difficult step, every moment of fear, every hard-won victory over the demons of her past. "What are you thinking about?" Dalton asked, reading her thoughtful silence. "I'm thinking that I'm the luckiest woman alive," Dawn replied. "I'm thinking that walking into the Silver Spur that day was the best thing you ever did. I'm thinking that I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I loved you so much then I thought my heart would burst." "I love you too," Dalton said simply. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after. You're my heart, Dawn. You always have been, and you always will be." They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the past they had overcome and the future that still stretched before them. Outside, the Nevada night was clear and bright, the same stars shining down that had witnessed their entire journey together. The years continued their inevitable march. Dawn and Dalton grew older together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated 50 years of marriage in 1934, surrounded once again by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. They were patriarchs now, the foundation of a large and loving family, proof that choosing love could change everything. When Dawn was 72 and Dalton was 75, they sat once more by their creek. It was harder to get there now, their bodies no longer as spry as they once were, but they made the journey because this place held so many memories. This was where it had all begun, where a broken woman had started to heal, where love had taken root and grown into something beautiful. "Do you have any regrets?" Dawn asked, watching the water flow past just as it always had. "Not a single one," Dalton replied without hesitation. "Every choice I made led me to you, and that makes all of them right." "I have one regret," Dawn admitted. Dalton looked at her in surprise. "What's that?" "I regret that I didn't trust you sooner. I regret all the time I wasted being afraid instead of reaching for the happiness you were offering. But then again, maybe I needed that time. Maybe I had to heal at my own pace." "You healed exactly when you were ready," Dalton assured her. "There's no timeline for recovering from trauma. You took the time you needed and then you let me in. That's all that matters." Dawn leaned against him, marveling that she could still find such comfort in his presence after 50 years. "You saved my life, you know. Not in some dramatic way, but in the way that really matters. You gave me a reason to heal, to hope, to believe that my future could be different from my past." "We saved each other," Dalton insisted, as he always did. "You gave me a home and a purpose. You made me believe that settling down was worth it, that building something lasting was possible. We healed together, Dawn. That's what made it work so well." They sat by the creek until the afternoon sun began to sink toward the horizon, talking about their life together and the family they had built. When they finally made their way back home, moving slowly but still hand in hand, Dawn felt at peace. Whatever time they had left, they would spend it together, loving each other until the very end. Dalton passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1937, just a few months shy of their 53rd anniversary. Dawn had known it was coming. His health had been declining for months, but the loss still hit her like a physical blow. For the first time in over half a century, she was alone. The family rallied around her, and their love carried her through the worst of the grief. But it was the memories of their life together that truly sustained her. She would sit on their porch and remember the countless evenings they had spent there watching the sunset. She would visit the creek and remember all the important moments that had happened there. She would look at their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and see the legacy of the love they had built together. Dawn lived for another 3 years, spending that time with her family and putting her affairs in order. She made sure the restaurants would continue, that the ranch would stay in the family, that all the pieces of the life she and Dalton had built would endure. And she wrote, pouring her story onto paper so that future generations would understand what their grandfather had done for her, how his love had transformed her life. When Dalton Vance passed away quietly in her sleep in the fall of 1940, she was buried next to Dalton under the cottonwood trees near the creek where they had fallen in love. Their graves bore simple markers with their names and dates, and beneath those a shared inscription that their children had chosen. They showed us that broken things can be beautiful, and that love heals all wounds. The story of Dawn and Dalton became family legend, passed down through generations. Their descendants would gather by the creek and tell the tale of the damaged woman and the patient cowboy, of how love and persistence had healed old wounds and built something lasting. It became a story about hope and resilience, about the power of choosing love even when fear seemed easier, about the truth that broken things, when mended with care and patience, could become more beautiful than they had ever been before. And in the small town of Lovelock, Nevada, where it had all begun, people still spoke of Dawn and Dalton Vance with respect and admiration. They remembered the couple who had proven that no one was too broken to love, that healing was always possible, and that happy endings were real if you were brave enough to reach for them. Their love story lived on, a testament to the transformative power of patience, kindness, and unwavering belief in another person's worth. It was proof that sometimes the most beautiful things in life grew from the most broken beginnings, and that love, real love, could heal even the deepest wounds. The legacy they left behind was not just in the businesses they built or the family they raised, but in the example they set. They showed everyone who knew them that it was possible to overcome trauma, to heal from abuse, to build a joyful life on the other side of pain. They proved that broken things could be beautiful, that scars told stories of survival rather than defeat, and that love, when given freely and patiently, had the power to change everything.